welcome to Decarbonize, the Clean Energy Podcast from Fresh Energy. My name is Justin Fay, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at Fresh Energy. I'm joined on today's podcast by Margaret Cherney Hendrick, Chief Executive Officer at Fresh Energy, and Bryn Kersling, our Director of Legislative and Grassroots Advocacy. We're so pleased to welcome you to our 2026 Legislative Preview Podcast. How you all doing?
I'm doing really
Great.
good. Excited for the discussion today.
It's going to be a fun one.
If you're listening to the podcast, you're well aware, of course, that here in Minnesota, we are living through an impossibly difficult moment. In addition to mourning the senseless killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, we're heartbroken for all the Minnesota families ripped apart, terrorized, and forced into hiding. The unlawful, racist, and violent conduct by federal agencies is impacting everyone on Fresh Energy staff, our partners, and the communities in which we live and work. I also want to recognize that, especially given that we're here doing a legislative podcast, that this is our first legislative podcast since the assassination of Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman and the shooting of John and Yvette Hoffman last June. Melissa Hortman was an incredible leader, a champion for clean energy, and we miss her deeply. The Hortman and Hoffman families continue to be in our thoughts, and we know will be in the thoughts of folks at the legislature this spring, winter and spring. Margaret, this is really a lot.
Thanks, Justin. It is. It's a heavy time to be doing this work. And we know, like our community as a whole, Fresh Energy staff and partners, as you mentioned, are dealing with unprecedented challenges right now. But we also know that climate change isn't taking a break. Advancing our mission at Fresh Energy to achieve equitable carbon neutral economies is more important than ever. The Minnesota Legislature is going to convene on February 17th, 2026, and Fresh Energy will be there, as we have been for more than 30 years, doing the work of advocating for bold, clean energy policy solutions that meet the challenge of climate change.
Yeah, that's just absolutely right. You know, as staff here, I know we're all just so incredibly proud to have the opportunity to do this work and grateful that we're able to do it together. And we're excited to tell all of you listening a little bit about what we have cooking for this legislative session. Now, I think we all understand that clean energy policy, important as it is, and while it will definitely still be on the agenda at the Capitol this year, might not grab the headlines that we otherwise wish it would, just simply given the reality of everything happening in our state. Before we dive into clean energy policy conversation, Bryn, can you maybe give us just a little bit of context for what the legislative landscape is going to look like this session?
Yeah, and just to underscore what you and Margaret have said here too, it's a tough time, but we have to do both, and we're kind of called to do both right now, to defend these big issues, but also do what we do best and continue the work on climate progress here. So, we're in the second half of the biennium, so we know that it's going to be a shorter session, and it'll feel a little bit more like a sprint. If we can if this pace could get any faster than last year, it might.
I
And
mean,
although
last year's incredibly slow
yeah,
pondering session.
very
Yeah.
even more condensed could pose different obstacles. But although it's faster, it's more condensed. Our list of possibilities is also a little reduced since it's not a budget year. And the economic outlook is not empowering substantial spending. So, what we're looking towards is more policy heavy items and being creative with the small buckets of money that are out there and navigating new and different obstacles that come with the second half of the biennium. And as a reminder too, we still have a divided house after all of those special elections. It's still a 67 splits. And so, that might mean that each co-chair from each party only gets the gavel maybe 4 times. So we're aiming to be very precise, do the relationship work and education ahead of hearings, that ensure success before we even get into the room. So, I think I probably mentioned too, it's an election year. Legislators, folks, they make their messaging pivots. They're adjusting their priorities accordingly, and we have to be aware of that. So, I think notably, right, Governor Walz is not seeking reelection. So perhaps the administration might be playing a different role here. I don't know what yet that'll look like, and I don't want to editorialize too much, but I think we'd encourage this administration to really solidify their legacy on climate and energy work in their final work as an administration. So, and oftentimes, we've seen that too. The administration plays a bigger role in some final negotiations at the end of session. I would anticipate that would be similar case this year, of regardless of Governor Walz's retirement. And um, yeah, and speaking of end of session, I think this is often where Margaret steps in to speak to omnibus bills and representing Fresh Energy's highest priorities to legislative leadership and during those hearings. But we also tap in Margaret when there's a particularly impactful issue.
Yeah, that's right. I like to think that I'm somewhat of a deployable asset for the team. And I think a really good example of that is I came in late last session to offer Fresh Energy's testimony on the defense of the 100% bill. And that, really signals to our partners and to policymakers what issues we're prioritizing as an organization. I'm, always in the background, vetting strategy and working collaboratively with Brennan, Justin, and the team, but you'll see me when I'm deployed at the highest and best use of our time and to signal priorities up at the Capitol this year.
Yeah, if you see Margaret, it means that it's very serious. We're taking it very
Very,
seriously.
very serious, yes.
As opposed to the joking around that Bryn and I do.
Indeed.
Uh, well, Margaret, you sort of said the magic words there a minute ago, which is 100%. So let's pull on that thread just a little bit. As we think about the priorities that we're going to have this year, nothing is going to be higher than defense, right? We have had an awful lot of success in the last several years in Minnesota. We have some really, really strong at or near nation leading clean energy and climate policy already on the books. And first and foremost among those list of accomplishments is Minnesota's 100% by 2040 clean, carbon-free electricity law. That was under some threat last year. You had to come over to the Capitol, and it was a little harder to get that to sort of beat that back than we had hoped it would be. Um, can you both tell us a little bit just about kind of what the importance of that law and what we think the conversation might look like at the Capitol this year?
Yeah, absolutely. And just for folks as a reminder, we had kind of a banner year for getting a lot of really wonderful legislation passed in 2023, including the 100% bill. In 2024, the political landscape looked quite a bit different, and we had, our really important 100% by 2040 bill come under some scrutiny. We had some amendments made that would have diluted the impact, if not, sort of suggested that certain fuels and technologies were going to count as carbon free when, we knew from a technical perspective that just wasn't the case. So we did a lot of work to make sure that we could defend this win. We anticipate that we're going to be doing a lot of that during this session as well. But essentially, this is a bill that is going to help to enable economy-wide decarbonization, and that starts with the power sector here. So to have a commitment that all electricity serving Minnesota ratepayers will be carbon free by 2040 really allows us then to look to other sectors of the economy that are going to be decarbonizing using that clean electricity as a tool for economy-wide decarbonization. So electrification of transportation, moving to heat pumps in buildings, you name it, it's going to have really important economy-wide impacts. And this is also just one of many policy wins that Fresh Energy and many of our partners have worked to achieve that have really been the reason we have seen a 50% reduction in power sector emissions since 2005. And that is just a real testament to how advocacy on advancing clean energy in Minnesota can really achieve results. And again, Fresh has been working on this, Fresh Energy has been working on this for nearly 30 years. And so this is going to be a really important policy for us to continue to defend. What do you think, Bryn?
Yeah. Well, I think just to underscore that, this framework puts Minnesota on this clear path. And it includes the flexibility for regulators and utilities to address affordability and reliability as well. But also it gives predictability. And I think that further emphasizes um, our commitment to the core of this language, the bill context being technology neutral. And we're committed to protecting that neutrality, so that any technology must pass equal rigorous standards and that everybody's playing by the same rules. So, we were there every time there was an attempt to circumvent this process and make predeterminations about any given technology. And I think, we were very successful in that defense. Um, I think we were also successful in part because Fresh Energy supporters were reaching out to their legislators to the tune of hundreds of contacts, and asking that our carbon-free standard stays intact. And I think that's something really special about our action network and the ability to do that rapid response really quickly. And we have an incredible community around us as well.
Absolutely. I don't think people are, taking action are never more powerful than when they're sticking up for things that they love and things that they care about. And I think that's, this is one small example of that. We're seeing it in communities in real time in, much more visible ways right now. But certainly when we talk about work at the legislature and at the Capitol, lawmakers really do actually care and they do actually listen when people show up at meetings, when they pick up the phone and call, and really grateful for all of our supporters that plug in. Um, Maybe pivoting a little bit from thinking about defense to thinking about what are some things that we're going to actually uh, lead on in a proactive solving problem sense in 2026. One piece of legislation that we're especially excited about is a bill focused on something called energy burden. This bill is the brainchild of Shuba Harris, who's Fresh Energy's Chief Equity Policy Officer, and joined our team about a year ago. We're really, really grateful to be working with Shuba, and bills like this are exactly what we were hoping we would be able to work on when she came aboard. Bryn, can you tell us a little bit about what the energy burden bill is and what people should know about it?
Yeah, it's a topic we're exploring, and when we talk about energy burden, it's usually referring to, the percent of household income spent on your energy costs. So, and thinking about energy broadly, it's how we participate in modern life. So that makes affordable energy an essential need. Um, so as we're exploring what a cap would look like, it gives some certainty to not having, out of control costs and making things unaffordable. So say it was something like 4%. So no more than 4% of household income would be spent on energy costs. So legislation that would help enable that cap would give the Public Utilities Commission authority to create a clear, predictable statewide affordability benchmark. And for Minnesotans who have high energy burden, functionally, we're seeking to reduce the likelihood that those households need to choose between energy and other essentials. Um, and then from a broader perspective, it can also strengthen public support for clean energy policies by ensuring that costs and benefits are distributed more fairly.
And I think this, maybe a good time to point out that this type of work is really, I think, hallmark of what we do best at Fresh Energy. It really embodies our commitment to advancing a clean energy economy that works for all Minnesotans, and really, I think, make sure that equity remains at the heart of all of the work that we do. And I think I just want to point out for folks who, are not aware that Fresh Energy passed a 5-year strategic framework, Vision 2030, last year. And for the first time, we've really done a lot to not just focus on equity, which we've done rigorously for the last couple of years, but we now have integrated equity into all that we do. What that means for us is not just working on energy affordability, but making sure that this broad economy-wide energy transition is not exacerbating existing inequities and not creating new inequities, as we have seen historically happen across major transitions like this. How we power our lives and how we use energy in our homes is so intimately tied to our opportunities to live a clean and healthy life, to be able to afford not only our energy, but all the other ancillary needs that we need to survive, right? And if we can't rely on heat, especially in the winter, that becomes a really dangerous thing. So we are really taking into account all of the facets of daily life that clean energy touches, and we're trying to account for those. And I think, workforce and job transitions and inviting folks who have not participated in the clean energy economy historically, those are all really critical pieces for us as we think through what policies that we want to run at the legislature, but then who's coming to the table to help create those policies with us. And I just think this is a good time to kind of lift up on a process point of view, how we do our work, not just, where we do our work and the outcomes.
Just like you, Margaret, I've had the opportunity to work at Fresh Energy for a minute now, and have had the chance to sort of see our evolution on this area of our work, and really, truly, it is, I think, uh, great and motivating as a member of the staff to see us really leading in on questions like who pays and who benefits from, the policies that we're standing forward. It sounds obvious, but you don't, it's so easy to overlook those sort of really fundamental questions. So I think maybe turning the page a little bit and thinking about another issue area, folks that have been following Fresh Energy and doing climate work for a while will be aware that transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, both in Minnesota and nationally. And at Fresh Energy, we have a wonderful transportation team. And a key focus for them this year is uh, continuing to move forward work on sustainable aviation fuel, which is sometimes abbreviated as a SAF, and specifically a tax credit bill that was considered and debated at the legislature last year. While much of Fresh Energy's work involves advocating for electrifying our economy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, some specific applications, like aviation, present unique challenges to lowering emissions. SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, has emerged as a new and innovative industry, one that has some pretty real economic development opportunity for the state of Minnesota, and some interesting bipartisan cross-section of support from folks around the state. Bryn, what are you seeing and hearing in the world of SAF for 2026?
Yeah, well, last session there was a lot of work on it and some good groundwork set. Fresh Energy advocated for incentives that would reward lower carbon intensity scores, and like you said, that represents an enormous economic opportunity for Minnesota. I have to name Anjali Bains, our managing director of transportation, has been participating in stakeholder discussions and helping steer this legislation to a consensus, but also being the best version of this legislation it can be. And empowering the development of sustainable aviation fuel, I want to name that, like, that would create momentum that transitions us away from the current fossil fuel monopolized status quo. That's where we're at right now, and I think this is a difficult area of work, but the status quo is not going to get us to decarbonizing this sector of the economy. So, and like you said, it's one of the few things that has bipartisan support. So, absolutely capitalizing on that momentum, and having a good time making new friends and meeting some new people that we haven't worked with before. So, there's a wide variety of stakeholders here, and it's heartening to see consensus being built in this area from a wide range of interests.
And I think this is also just a key example of how fresh energy can bring a clean energy perspective to a really complicated and emerging market. and do a lot of good by bringing that perspective. And you know, I think Minnesota right now is kind of a hot spot for SAF production right now because we have sort of all of the core ingredients that you might hope for to not only make fuels that could replace the fossil fuel driven jet fuel that we use today, but we also have all of the other sort of core criteria to stand up the market. So not just the production side, the distribution side, the off takers, and that's why folks are really excited about Minnesota as a SAF hub. And there's a lot of opportunity for Minnesota to demonstrate how to grow this market sustainably and in a way that's going to help to draw down emissions, which are significant from commercial aviation right now. This is one of the harder to abate sectors, as both Justin and Bryn have mentioned. So we see a lot of opportunity here. Our real goal right now in engaging with this particular set of incentives is to make sure that tax credits and the eligibility for receiving those tax credits also go to fuels that are more clean energy oriented. So right now, the bill is written to afford eligibility to fuels that are bio-based. So primarily crop-based right now. And we see, candidly, the most carbon reduction potential associated with fuels that are produced with electricity. And that is the power to jet pathway. And so we are working really hard to broaden the conversation to be able to invite in power to jet producers to benefit and demonstrate, market viability in Minnesota alongside bio-based fuels. And we are also doing a lot of communications and advocacy work otherwise to make sure people understand the opportunities here. Because commercial aviation is not going to go away. It's not one of those, behaviors that we can hope to, transition entirely to, a mode shift to, trains and such. People are going to still fly, and commercial jets are just too large to electrify, and batteries aren't super viable. So there's going to have to be a fuels-based solution. And so we've done a lot of technical work at Fresh Energy to really understand where we want to weigh in and really make sure that when we use the word sustainable to describe aviation fuel, that we are advocating for the highest and best use case to draw down emissions. And for us, that's power to jet. And that's why we're working so hard on this bill.
Definitely, definitely. Well, moving beyond transportation, the building space is another area that has been pretty difficult to move forward with decarbonizing at the scale that we need to, but we have had some successes here in Minnesota in the last few years. One example of that is a geothermal planning grant program that Fresh Energy led the development of that passed in 2024 and has now been implemented and uh, wildly successful and also really timely. We see at the federal level that geothermal is another one of those areas that does have some bipartisan agreement and interest. Margaret, can you tell us a little bit about the importance of geothermal and the geothermal planning grant program that we hope to continue building here in Minnesota?
Yeah, we are big geothermal fans here at Fresh Energy. I think, as everyone is well aware, we have particularly cold winters in Minnesota. This winter has been no different.
Lies.
Uh, yes. So, when you think about trying to convert our heating systems to technologies that don't rely on fossil fuels, we use a disproportionate amount of natural gas, much higher than the national average, really because that natural gas is driving our heating systems here in Minnesota. If you think about how to convert your technology over to electric, it is challenging because of this cold climate that we have. Uh, However, geothermal is one of those amazing technologies where because the temperature of the earth and its aquifers are pretty consistent, you don't have to worry about any sort of limitations with cold climate for this particular technology. And it works really well in a district setting where you can interconnect buildings like hospitals, like um, grocery stores that have a lot of waste heat they can dump that waste heat into these interconnected systems. So then you have to rely even less on the heat of the earth, and you can just use this waste heat to move around. So the economies of scale that you can get with these systems interconnecting commercial and residential buildings, it just drives down price. It's a super reliable way to move heat around. And it's a business model that folks understand. We know how to own and operate pipe-based solutions, and so there is, an elegant transition to be had in terms of the labor dynamics as well. So, for all those reasons, we are super excited about geothermal. We have been just incredibly excited to see how quickly folks up at the Capitol across the aisle have been getting on the geothermal bandwagon too. And that I think is just, exactly what we saw when we put out these geothermal planning grants. We got this passed in 2024. These are grants that help to offset planning, just that. That is the highest barrier to moving forward with projects like this, is doing all of the planning work, all the engineering work ahead of actually implementing a project. So we wanted to reduce that challenge, de-risk the investment, and hand out some of these grants to make those projects move more smoothly. And what we saw was that we had just far more applications, almost double the applications for the money that we had made available for these grants. And so, this is a good piece of data for us here, where we're going to go back and we're going to try to pass another round of planning grants to be able to continue to meet the demand for folks to be moving forward with systems like this. And I just want to point out, it's all over the state that folks are interested. This is not just a metro thing. So a couple of projects that folks are probably pretty familiar with by this point: Rice Creek Commons in Ramsey County, Mount Airy Homes, City of St. Paul, a couple of really important, pretty well-known projects that got planning grants. But then also City of Crookston, the Woods neighborhood, got a planning grant, which we were thrilled to see. We do a lot of work with our Empower Crookston network out there. So it was great to see them connect to these dollars. And then City of Sandstone. So the Sandstone School redevelopment got a planning grant as well. So we're just really, again, eager to get back to the Capitol to try to pass another round. So Bryn, what do you think about this momentum?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the wide support. I mean, there's federal support for this. It's one of the few technologies that survived federal clean energy initiative cuts, and we should run with that as far as we can. State level support, local level support, bipartisan interest, and as you mentioned, we can see the geographic diversity in demand for the projects. And we should really capitalize on this moment where people are excited and want to keep exploring that. So and I should mention too, the last session, although we didn't get everything we wanted on it, we did get an improvement in the eligibility language. So um when there is more money, when, not if, um tribal governments will also be eligible applicants for these planning grants. So I think that was a win in expanding who can access this. So it'll be exciting to continue to advocate for more funding and demonstrate the demand. Um, yeah, and I think just in general, thermal energy networks, we see a handful of opportunities um, this session. We anticipate the TENS working group, that's Thermal Energy Networks Working Group, will inform some legislation that helps establish a process for approving more projects. Um, and help navigate the PUC process. So I think that's another one that we're looking forward to advocating for.
Awesome. Well, maybe just sort of sticking with the buildings theme for just another moment here. One of the other bills that was also introduced last year and that our buildings team colleagues are excited about taking another crack at in 2026 is a bill that focuses on HVAC upgrades for schools. Margaret, can you share with us a little bit, like why HVAC for schools in general, and how can it help Minnesota and our building sector decarbonize?
Yeah, I might answer this in a little bit of a backwards fashion, just starting with like why do we have to decarbonize buildings proper? And I think we started touching on this with our conversation with geothermal, but it's just really important to note that buildings themselves are a top source of carbon pollution, both globally and in Minnesota. So in the US, they contribute 31% of our national greenhouse gas emissions. And in Minnesota, because we have these cold winters and we use so much natural gas, we see that emissions from both residential and commercial buildings are on the rise. And so this is a key area of work for Fresh Energy to be able to start the conversation and advance the conversation on how do we transition off of natural gas, off of propane, and onto cleaner solutions. Of course, this is a really challenging topic because of heating reliability. Now that our summers are warmer, it's cooling reliability as well. It all ties to energy efficiency and, how to get a little bit technical, how tight your building envelope is and how well insulated your windows and walls are. So it's all interconnected here, right? So we're thinking about the building standards, we're thinking about the technology we deploy to heat and cool our buildings. And what better way to start that conversation than within schools? And I say that because in Minnesota, we have a lot of work to do to bring our schools up to a better standard in terms of being energy efficient writ large. But we have so many of our schools who are not being able to cool properly or sufficiently, to heat properly or sufficiently. And so this is just, I think, it's hard to argue with spending money on making lives easier and better for teachers and kids, and using technology like heat pumps through HVAC systems to be able to do that. And I like to say, I come from academia too. So if you can proof out a technology in a school, that's a learning opportunity for a bunch of kids too. I love the idea of having a living laboratory in schools. And you know who benefits from that too is all of the parents who have kids go back home and say, hey, you know what's going on at this school? So there are just so many angles why, we think, working on schools is a really good place to start here. And it's a campus system. It's easily replicatable. So if you can do it in one school, you can do it in other schools. So we're really excited to be able to advance this type of work and draw down emissions in the places where it matters most first.
Yeah, and in terms of, a structure, maybe something that we can emulate is, the wildly successful Solar for Schools program in Minnesota. This is, not exactly the same, but a similar mechanism in terms of how we pursue this legislatively and the familiarity with implementation for improving school infrastructure from an energy standpoint. And I think you said it really well. Like, people want to see the positive effects on student health, and learning outcomes. Having learning environments, a 90-degree classroom is not good. Is not a good learning environment. And this is something that we can tackle with bipartisan support. There's a lot of interest, and I think there's even more opportunities for work to be done here.
Well, so maybe transitioning to another sector, we've talked about transportation, we've talked about buildings. Heavy industry is another area of emerging interest for Fresh Energy, and it's a much more nascent conversation than what we're seeing in some of these other economic sectors. Margaret, can you tell our folks a little bit about what's happening on heavy industry at Fresh Energy right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you taking notes, heavy industry is one of the five sectors that Fresh Energy's work is focused on. The others, as you may have gathered from our conversation, are electricity, transportation, buildings, and agriculture. And Brandon Isaacson is our brilliant managing director of industry who's spearheading this work. And when I say spearheading, I really mean it because I mentioned our strategic framework, Vision 2030, and heavy industry and agriculture are our newest program areas. And so we really are kind of out on the bleeding edge here of making sure that these sectors of the economy that are hardest to abate, which means that they are going to be the hardest to, reliably, durably draw down emissions from. Uh, we're leaning into that work. We're leaning into that challenge. They have not received as much attention as other sectors of the economy on the decarbonization front, and that is for good reason. It's because, the electrification is not always going to be the easiest technology to deploy. We're going to have some fuel-based conversations, and because, these are really culturally, economically, um, just important sectors of the economy to Minnesota in particular. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking very carefully and thoughtfully about how to engage with the energy transition in these sectors. So um, I think, just setting the stage here a little bit, heavy industry, it's a major driver of the economy in Minnesota, huge source of jobs across the state. It also, though, accounts for 15% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. And the highest emitting facilities in Minnesota are tied to food processing, chemicals, pulp and paper, iron ore processing. And really, these emissions are driven, once again, by the use of fossil fuels. So we now know that it's like 37 facilities in Minnesota account for 87% of CO2 produced by the state's manufacturing sector. So we know where the emissions are coming from. We know how to, start those conversations, have those conversations about decarbonization. And that's really what we're leaning into. So where is it possible to apply electrification to decarbonize? Those are in the low and medium heat industry sectors. So food manufacturing as an example. And where are we going to have to get a little bit more creative about applying fuel-based solutions? So for example, we're pretty excited about using green hydrogen, for example, in some steel manufacturing. So we're leaning into this type of conversation. We're forming a lot of new important relationships, and we're starting to, really show up the legislature to advance the conversation across the aisle and with policymakers.
Yeah, and I think, we're seeing a healthy appetite at the legislature on this topic. There's bipartisan support across, I think, every bill that we've supported in this sector. And that also makes them increasingly viable for passage in these tight margins, that we're seeing uh, over this biennium. And I also think, being early in conversations gives us the greatest opportunity to steer us towards the best climate outcomes. Um, as this is an emerging topic, and being at the forefront, much easier to see the outcomes, um, the best outcomes we can see when we're there early.
For sure. Well, speaking of getting there early, there is one last emerging issue that we wanted to maybe just let make folks aware of, and this has been getting a lot of buzz and a lot of steam lately, and that's an emerging technology called balcony solar. And there's a potential for some legislation on that topic this year. Bryn, can you tell us just very briefly a little bit about balcony solar?
There's a lot of exciting interest on that. Balcony solar refers to plug-in solar technology, and it's a technology that you see a lot across Europe. It has growing interest and support in the United States. Interesting enough, states like Utah have passed similar legislation as to what's being explored in Minnesota, and that's that sort of permissive language for plug-in solar and removing those barriers for people to access this kind of technology. It's kind of, an on-ramp into participating in clean energy technology if you haven't had that interface before. So there's a lot of sort of grassroots excitement about it, and it's a fun technology, and would love to see more support for it.
I think it's such a great example of, capturing hearts and minds and, being that entry point for folks on the clean energy side. If you see your neighbor with it, you're gonna start a conversation, you're gonna ask some questions, and it's really similar to what we see with rooftop solar, what we see with, EVs. And so um, we're excited for all the reasons that it, enables folks to participate, low entry point, and also starts a conversation.
A gateway technology, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Absolutely. We're we're excited to be working with Representative Larry Kraft on that this year. And it's really, as Bryn said, trying to remove some barriers to make this available to folks so we can unlock some of those benefits that Margaret was just talking about. Well, as always, we're doing a lot at Fresh Energy, even in a legislative session where there's maybe some challenges with regards to bandwidth for these issues. And being successful advocates for such a broad agenda requires a team of really talented folks plugging in together. So maybe as we sort of wrap up here and put a bow on our conversation today, Bryn, can you just sort of tell folks a little bit about the team that is going to be working at the Capitol this year? Who you got?
Yeah, absolutely. Should I put on my announcer voice, the starting five for the Fresh Energy
Please do.
Capital
Please do.
Squad?
Yeah.
Well, I'm your day-to-day capital person, making sure that our policy experts are in the right place at the right time, monitoring those committee hearings, and sort of directing people to where they need to be. John Burns is our longtime contract lobbyist who's been on our team for how many years, Justin?
Over a decade, and I believe he at this point predates all but one of our current staff, which is
Wow.
just incredible. Uh, that doesn't happen very often, so we're
Yeah.
really, really
He,
grateful.
I mean, he brings so much knowledge about how to navigate the legislature. He has incredible depths of relationships. I mean, I've been with him in meetings in different cities around the state, and he always knows somebody. So he's just so deeply connected and an
And
incredible asset. Um, and
and
he's
he'll come to your house and help put a fire out too if you have a problem, right?
volunteer firefighter. I mean, he's truly like the team dad, and he's just an all-around wonderful person to work with, and has been such a great resource for our Capital Pathways interns and other staff to really demystify the legislative process and being more present at the Capitol. So, a wonderful member of the team. Um, yeah, Ethan Culver is our senior associate of campaigns and coalitions, and he's the voice behind the advocacy and rapid response requests and opportunities that folks receive. So he'll be leading efforts to amplify supporters of Fresh Energy to reach out to their legislators and meet those important decision points that steer outcomes to protect and further our clean energy policy goals. I will say, if you're not already signed up to receive those messages from Ethan, make sure you visit that website to sign up, or better yet, forward it to a friend, because I bet if you're listening to this, you're already signed up. But I will say, in a world of many, many spam text messages, I promise you, and I asked Ethan for permission to say this, he will be on the other side of that line, and he's always willing to chit chat. And nerd out about any topic here. So we use that, especially on text message, that two-way communication, and allowing people more access to advocating and showing up really powerfully in these spaces. So I'll also mention, we have a couple session only folks who join us, and this year our session associate is Molly McMullen, and she joins Fresh Energy with experience advocating for environmental, agriculture, and energy policy at the Minnesota Legislature, and she's a recent Humphrey School of Public Affairs graduate. So we are very lucky to have her helping steer this team and keep us all on task and organized. And then rounding out our team is Kai Hunt, who is our Capital Pathways intern this year, and a student at Macalester University. So we're looking forward to hosting Kai. I think this is our 11th year as a host organization at the Capital Pathways program, and looking forward to continuing to build a strong bench of emerging leaders in this space. So, and of course, this is the Capital team, but we have a depth of policy experts that we've mentioned through this conversation, and communication support that tap in and help accomplish our goals.
Do we have a near 100%, testimony or, writing letters of support for hearings rate across the program team? Something really high like that.
It's really high. I think we definitely will typically have more than 10 different staff testifying in a given session, which I think is just incredible breadth. And I know, Brent, you and I talk about this all the time. Like it's the quality of the people that we get to work with is like one of the most fun parts of the job, and we get to just sort of like walk around the Capitol with really, really smart people and sort of like look smart by proximity, which is really cool.
And
Well, you
I hear
guys are
it all
pulling the
the time.
puppet strings, so you know you're making us look good. So it's a real team effort, and I think it's working well.
Yeah,
It's
and I
good
hear
work,
it
you
from
guys.
legislators all the time. They look to us for our expertise and have a lot of trust in the information that we give them is uh, well researched and really eyes to the future and ambitious. So, we're very trusted in this space and looking forward to continuing that reputation.
And that reputation was not something we take for granted. It's been built over many years by a lot of different people, including a lot of you that are at home or in your car, or wherever you are listening to this podcast today. We certainly covered a lot in our conversation. Thank you to Bryn and Margaret for giving our listeners some insight into what's happening this legislative session and what it could look like for clean energy and climate in Minnesota. And I want to put a particular plug in here for Fresh Energy's Action Network. It's the best way to stay up to date on legislative and regulatory action when it's needed at the time that it's needed. We'll send you the occasional text alert, invites to events and beyond, and you might make a really cool new friend in Ethan Culver, as Bryn mentioned.
Yep, that's right. We're trying to make this like we're your glorified administrative assistant, like doing the research, knowing when the time is right. Everybody listening, you have your day jobs and the things that you need to be focusing on. So let's take out all the work out of it and send you the most impactful and timely notices where your action has the most positive impact. So and like I said, feel free to chat with Ethan. So, and bonus points if you forward this to a friend or family member and grow this action network. So, we can continue to show up big in moments where we need to.
Absolutely. Well, you can stay up to date on Fresh Energy's work at fresh-energy.org or follow us on social media. We're on Blue Sky. Thank you to everyone listening for subscribing to our podcast. You can support Fresh Energy's work by donating today, which you can do at our website. Thank you to the band Palm Psalms for providing our theme song that you just heard, DGAF, off of their album Otuhaka. Get the latest from the band at palmpsalms.com. Thank you for listening and have a great day.